Uno, dos, tres.
Hello, everyone. I am Marc Skinner. I'm here with Gregory Cleghorn and Kenneth Nelson, and we are three Black Pratt grads. We are all graduates of the the Fine Arts Photo Department of Pratt Institute. We all graduated many, many, many years ago, and this is part of a series of discussions on photography that we're having. And we hope you enjoy them. Tonight's topic, or today's topic, if you're watching in the day, is do the math. So we all know that photography has a lot of mathematics to it. Basically there's f-stop and there's ISO and then there's shutter speed and there's distance and depth of field. And there's all sorts of things, aspect ratios, formats. But we wanted to talk about math in any way that we felt as individuals applied to photography. The main thing I wanted to say before we get started is that because it is National Women's Month, I'd like to say God bless Beyonce, because she is the one who was able to get Vogue to hire a couple of years ago a Black photographer for the first time. And then after that, British Vogue was able to hire a Black photographer for the first time, Black woman photographer. And then they hired a second Black photographer to photograph. This is for the covers. These are for the covers, not for the inserts, but for the covers. So that individual who isn't a photographer was able to use their influence to make a serious change. And so that's my one sort of public service announcement. Anyway, we're going to
Queen
start.
Bee. Queen Bee.
Queen Bee. So we're going to start with Kenneth, and Ken, do the math.
Okay. My math is on the screen right now. If you have any,
Oh my
any
God.
relationship to photography, you are looking at an exposure value chart.
Is that a Kodak chart?
It's an exposure value chart. It's not Kodak.
Oh
It's
my
just an
God.
exposure value chart.
Okay.
Kodak doesn't own the rights to exposure values. it's a physics thing. It's a mathematics thing. So what you're doing is you're looking at a chart, and on the chart on the left-hand side are shutter speeds, and on the top sides are f-stops. And the ISO of any particular film or sensitivity to chip
Right.
is noted here. Okay, so in this particular instance, we have an ISO of 100, so that's a base. That doesn't change, that's constant. What we do have is again, shutter speeds on the left and f-stops on the right. And notice that we have a series of repeating numbers from 0 through, 19. And basically, I'm not going to go into the whole physics of it, but just realize that every number referenced here, so every number 4 is the same exact exposure. Every number 6 is the same exact exposure, even though your shutter speeds are changing and your f-stops are changing. So at the intersection of a 30th of a second and at f4, it's 9. Okay, so that means that any other 9 in a change of a shutter speed or change of a shutter speed, change of an f-stop is the same equal value. So
Okay, so hold on. So what does the 9 what does the 9 represent?
Google the theory behind the mathematical theory behind
Oh man,
exposure
you're gonna
value.
make me
I do
Google
not have the
it.
time
Okay.
to explain that.
No, it's exposure value. So sometimes, a lot of times,
EV, the EV.
Mhm.
a lot of times people speak about photography in terms of its exposure value, the cameras, in terms of their exposure values now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's something we didn't, in analog, you didn't really talk about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
it was
so
on the metering. The old meters you could either meter by,
yes.
Shutter speed or whatever, but it would also give you the exposure value.
They would give you the exposure value, but I think the exposure values would be constant where the shutter speeds and f-stop would change. So that would tell you that any combination of f-stop and shutter speed would be the same exposure value.
Okay.
So if
Well,
the circular ones had the dial, I think the digital ones may have been a little bit different.
Okay. But it's like if you need a faster shutter speed, you have to compensate the whole inverse proportionality of the 1/30th of a second, or 1/60th of a second, that's going to give you less light, so you have to open the lens in
Right.
proportion.
Right. So
Okay.
what I'm gonna what I'm gonna basically say is that for the people who are out there who are not familiar with this, these are f-stops, and for every f-stop you go up to the right, you are cutting the amount of light that's hitting the chip or the film in half. Okay, and for every shutter speed that you go down, you're doing the exact same thing. You're cutting the amount of time that the exposure of the chip is to light. Okay. And what I'm going to basically, I've done this just to preface you for what I'm about to show you. Yesterday, I went out and I did some photographs, and I needed to understand or figure out what would be the constant exposure value if I wanted to modify my depth of focus. All right. And so what I did was I set up my first shot, and my first shot was at f2.8, and it wound up being at 1/250th of a second. So that means that my exposure value was f11. I'm sorry, my exposure value was 11. Okay, so when again, f2.8 is the widest f-stop that I can use on my lens. So that's as wide as I can go. And that meant that the fastest I can go was 2/50th of a second, right? For the exposure value of 11 for that particular scene. And then what I did was I took that one exposure and I said, okay, I need to close down my f-stop to get a bigger depth of focus. So I went from 2.8 to 5.6. So that means that I went up 2 stops, went down 2 stops. Okay, that means my equivalent exposure value underneath this chart for 5.6 at 11 would have been 1/60th of a second. They are their exact same exposures, just different f-stop and different shutter speed in combination.
Right.
Right, and so you're changing the shutter speed and the aperture for the to render the scene a certain way.
Right, right. And the mathematics part of this is just that you're doubling or you're halving whichever way you go, either in your shutter speed or in your f-stop. Okay, so with that, I'm going to now show you the images that I was working on. Okay, so I hope you can see
That's a big deal. That's a big point that I wanna say something else to after you finish that. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. So these are my two shots that I was working on yesterday. Can you see them?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Just so you know that they're two different. They're the same exposure value of 11, but if you look at them clearly, you notice that there's a slight difference between the two. On the left, the background is a little clearer, although it's not really clearly in focus. It is a little clearer than what is happening on the right side. That's because this one was shot at f5.6 at 1/60th, while this one was shot at f2.8 at 1/250th of a second. Okay, and the need for that was to bring more in focus in the background by choosing a smaller f-stop. And my point of reference for these photographs was this English muffin in the front. I was pretty intrigued by this English muffin, and I said, okay, what is this doing there? You know, this is the Where's Waldo. It's the easiest Where's Waldo you can find. Okay, this is the anomaly that's in the shot. Okay, and actually, I think it's pretty interesting that when I show you this here, you can actually see the change in the focus. Here, it's sharper than here. Okay, and if I slide this over a bit, you can actually see the difference in the depth of focus where this little disc is more fuzzier than this one is. Okay.
Fuzzy, is that a photographic technical term, fuzzy?
No, it's more out of focus, or one's more in focus than the other. They're not completely in focus. Okay, so that being said,
I got a joke about bread if you guys want to hear it. I don't know if it's copyrighted or not.
Let me finish this up first.
Go ahead, please. Go
Thank
ahead.
you very much.
Okay, so English muffin, you got me on that English muffin.
So math being the constant in this, being that you have to know math in order to mentally understand where you're going when you're changing your shutter speeds and your f-stops. Thank you very much.
So I want to ask a question. When you saw the English muffin there, Did you see the individual who left the English muffin, or did you just turn
It
the
was
corner,
him.
walk down the block, and that English muffin had been there since you'd
It
started
was
walking?
him.
No
That
one
was his
was
English muffin.
no
He
one was
dropped it.
owning no one was owning the English muffin. It was there in absence of its owner.
Uh,
Okay.
All right. So
well,
yeah.
go ahead. Go
No, no,
ahead.
no. You go ahead, Greg.
No. You're talking about your shot. Go ahead. Talk about your shot.
I'm
I'm going
done.
off topic.
No,
Oh,
I'm
well,
done.
because of the COVID restriction, being, lifted, they opened the zoo, right? So I go
Okay.
into the zoo and they have a new exhibit. There was a slice of white bread, a slice of wheat, a slice of rye behind the gates. So
Okay.
I'm like, huh, what's going on here? So I got to a sign that tells you about the exhibit. It says bread in captivity.
Okay.
Not my joke. I didn't write it. I can't take copyright for that. Sorry, that was a terrible joke, but it's clean enough. You could tell your kids as a dad joke. Mark can use that one. He's got kids. That's
Yeah.
it. Sorry. That was terrible. Forgive me, please. Oh, is it
Okay.
my turn? All right, let's go.
Yes, sir. Greg, do the
Do the
math.
math. Do
Do
the
the math,
math.
Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Thank you. Do the math. Well, I kind of took a at first, I didn't know what exactly to make this. Do the math. I mean, all photography is math. Well, life is math. Walking, there's a physics to motion. There's mathematical for taking a breath, chewing, the bite force, everything is about math. Photographic math, it can be tricky, but it's technical enough. And now, well, nowadays it's simple enough where you just press the button and the camera does the math for you. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in one way, but for me, it kind of frees me up to be a little more creative and I can do some other things with it. So go ahead, put the first one up. The first one up, I kind of took liberty with do the math. And, I just saw this woman closely inspecting this, 99-cent corn. It's like, come on, lady, it's $1. It's like, you get what you pay for. It could be great, but she was really taking a close look at that 99-cent. But, I could have thrown her the 99 out of focus or thrown, but I just took it a shot. I thought it kind of tickled me that she was paying so much attention to this piece of ear of 99-cent corn. Okay, you go to the next one. I apologize for that.
Well,
Now,
hey, she's gotta feed a family, maybe, and yeah.
true. Well, there's the math. There's the economics of feeding the family. She
Mhm.
could have gone to, Albertsons or Ralph's or Key Food. I don't know if they have that in Walmart even.
Key
You
foods
know,
we have.
Key Food. You still have Key Food back east, yeah.
As
Or
a
Piggly Wiggly
matter of
down
fact, there was
south.
a key food right around the corner from Pratt, right? Right down the
Hmm.
block from Pratt.
And actually, I think that corn was like 4 for $1. Anyway, there weren't many left. They'd been picked over. But yeah, the economics of feeding your family. You go where you can. She can afford that. It's a good deal. That's what she got. So that was my little whimsy on that. Now this the math of I just kind of get it because reflections are always fun for me. I like the things they do and the refraction, and I used even with this one, that's one thing I do like about shooting out here in California. The skies are so freaking clear. It's ridiculous. I didn't normally I would have to you know throw the polarizer in and just flip it around until I got the refraction right. But it was just so crystal clear that I saw this raptor, this falcon, or just kind of taking a morning bath, and he just looked like he belonged there. It's like this, like a homage to National Geographic or something. But then I got a quandary. I was like, huh, do I do uh, 3x4 or 4x3? So go to the next one.
Okay.
So that's one of my a lot of times. Oh no, yeah, there we go. A lot of times my I try to stay traditional and shoot everything horizontally, but sometimes vertically just works better. You know,
Yeah.
so creatively and visually, one of my biggest do the math quandaries or choices, because photography is all about choices, is whether to shoot horizontal and let that work through, or vertically, so, and let go back to the other one. But it's a totally different aesthetic. This one he's looking across the
Right.
frame, and this one he's you're kind of being led up to him. And if you're a small creature, you're nervous right about now. But other than that, visually, um, it's this has been one of the toughest choices. Because some pictures just work vertically, even though it's I won't say poo poo, but it used to be looked down upon that. Photography is a horizontal medium. This is the way we see. We don't see like this.
Hmm.
But dang it, creatively, you just have to catch some images just the way they are, and the way they look best. This is pleasing to the eye for me. Not that the next one isn't good. You can go to the next one again. Yeah, I just get a kick out of both of them, and the clarity of the skies and the colors are just so yummy. Okay, that's it for that one. You can go to the next one. The next one was just man, it's just this area, and I'm just right by the San Bernardino Mountains, and we just had a rainstorm blow through, and they got snow on the mountains, and the color of the sky is just Then you not to get into the matching. For this one, I kind of metered on the white and brought it down because it was kind of blown out because it's so white and the sun is so strong out here, so that I could keep the detail in the white and bring the sun down. So this math in, exposure, and like you're saying, the exposure value, you could, back in the day, you just hit your light meter and it would give you an exposure value. And you had to figure out what you wanted to do with it there. If the thing's not moving,
Yeah.
you can go down to a, 60th of a second. But if the thing is moving, you got to pump it up. And then you look at your chart and see, okay, what's gonna be my exposure value of what's gonna give me exposure value for 11 at 1/500th of a second.
Yep.
So then you do that, you look at your chart, and it's like
Mhm.
has to be whatever it comes out to be. Um, but this one to get the exposure of the bright white statuettes and sorry about the nudity, but the, the white statuettes, and then get the deepening blue sky and the mountains in the background, the math of that, and then not to mention the color, the waves of color of the greens and the white. If you look at the histogram of that, it's this picture is just all over the place. But again, it's choices, and if it's a thing of, well, how do I hold the whites and still get that in the background and keep the color here? Then you got to definitely step into the math and the math of the exposure until it works. If you go out to shoot, be sure you factor in time to play around with it. Play with the camera, learn the exposures. Instead of, saying, somebody say, hey, I need a photographer. You're a photographer, aren't you? It's like, yeah, I need you to do this. And then you get to the event and it's like, oops, I'm over my head. So get out there, try the
Yeah.
camera, try to go to go to the park, ask the guys
Now, I
playing
have a
ball.
question
Hey,
for you. I got a question for you. I don't mean
sure, go ahead.
to
Go
interrupt,
ahead.
buddy. I got a question for you. You
Yeah.
you were you're really specific about whether something should be vertical or horizontal, and I get
Yeah.
the idea of the
Oops, he fell out.
x-axis geometric. Got it. Now, when you
You
get
broke up
to
badly. I didn't understand
You
when you
broke
get
up.
to okay. What I was saying is when you talked about the vertical and the horizontal, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
the two images previously, that's basically the idea of working along an x-axis and a y-axis, right? That's
Okay.
a mathematical geometric kind of idea, right?
Mhm.
So
Okay.
you're also thinking about where this image is going to be shown and what are the dimensions of your substrate. Is it the web where anything goes, or is it a printed piece of paper, and all those sort of considerations as well. Now in this one
Okay.
you mentioned the histogram. What's the histogram do?
Oh, The histogram is just a chart, graph, X and Y, of the light values. Color, blue has a certain wavelength, green has a certain wavelength, white has a certain blah, 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 wavelength. Red has a certain wavelength. And if you look on your camera, the more modern digital cameras, unless you're shooting with, whatever you're shooting with, it will show you the values of whatever it is that you're shooting or have shot. Also, if you take it into Photoshop or Lightroom too, you can have it show you the histogram so that you can control your whites, control all the colors, and be it with a slider bar or with a dragging the XY cursor to different areas on that XY graph, digitally or electronically. You can add color, take away color, shift color, take away all the color, or pump it up and super saturate it, or even in some of the programs you can flip it so it does inverse and you get a posterized effect. So histogram just shows you a graph representation of the color wavelengths. Is that good?
Works for me.
Okay. Yeah, but like I said, get out there and shoot, keep shooting, and most definitely, so that you can shoot almost anything, go out to the park, ask the, whatever game they're playing, hockey, basketball, baseball. Ask them if you could take some pictures. You're getting good at what you're doing. You just got a new camera, whatever, and experiment. Experiment with drag shutter. You don't have to, just because it's sports, you don't have to shoot everything at a high, still freeze frame. It's fun to get like a 30th of a second and you get the motion of the bat or motion of somebody sliding in there. And just experiment, experiment with fast stuff, slow stuff. And, you'd be surprised. Mr. Nelson, kid had this picture on the street, broad daylight, and I shut it all the way down, and he's got just this stream of people, and all you see is their feet, and static or steady, and they're just a blur. It's such a cool shot. You'll have to show that one later. But yeah, a lot of math in photography, but don't let it overwhelm you. Just have fun with it. Keep shooting. That's all I got.
I have a question. This is just
Sure.
a general question, really. Are we still, as photographers, using the 18% gray chart as a reference tool?
You
I
can.
do. Yeah, I do.
It works. It still works. I mean,
yeah, I use 18%. The cameras, when they have their automatic meters, they're all set for that 18% gray. So if you've metered first using the internal meter and then you've just switched to manual, then you're using the 18% gray. If you're just starting with manual and working your way through the exposure, then that's irrelevant to you. But for me, the kind of work that I tend to do when I do the portraits, a lot of times I'll photograph a gray shirt or a gray something on the ground or a gray flat, maybe a reflector card. Just last year, I didn't get really a chance to use it on set, but I picked up a what do they call those things? Oh, a color passport, color checker, and I've been doing a lot of tests with that to make sure I got proper profiles.
okay, you got it. You got to explain what 18% gray card is now.
Well, what an 18% gray card is it's a value that Kodak had discerned to give you the proper exposure when you photographed it. So
it's a certain value of gray that does what?
It helps you get the proper shades from white to black all the way through.
Okay, but color also. You said you do that. They have a similar thing for color.
Right. Well, all the sensors in the cameras they're monochromatic cameras, and the cameras convert them to black and white. But there's several layers of long story short, basically an 18% gray card. If you photograph that in the light in which you're going to use your camera, you will get more accurate color and a first value
0.
your exposure
Mhm.
that is what they call perfect, and then from there you can select either more exposure or less exposure to augment the rendering of what you're going to do.
Okay, so in the light that you're going to be shooting in, if you meter off the gray card, it will give you the proper exposure value. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but it has to be the light that's hitting the subject. So you can't just if you're if you're in the same light as your subject, you can certainly photograph the card in your hand. But if you are in the shadows and the subject is in the sunlight, and conversely, you're in the sunlight and your subject's in the shadows, you have to make sure that you photograph the card in the light that the subject is in order to get the proper exposure from the meter in the camera.
Cool. Okay.
I'll add to that by just saying that you also understand that your camera is seeing everything at 18% gray. So if you are shooting into the sunlight, it's going to see the sunlight at 18% gray. Therefore, if you know that if you shoot into the sunlight, you're really not going to get an exposure. But that is to indicate, the 18% gray that you're seeing. So you can shoot.
You could get an exposure shooting at the sun.
It'll be about 3 to 4 stops underexposed.
3 to 4? In other words, you're not going to see a daggone thing.
No, what'll happen is the sun will be a little tiny dot, and you'll have like a lot of gray around it.
Well, again, you're talking about and again, I won't belabor this, but that is if your CCD chip is reading the sun at 18% gray, then your whole exposure's off.
Right.
Because whatever the chip is seeing is 18% gray. Whatever you point it at, it's going to think it's 18% gray.
Right. And if I tried to meter off the shirt that you're wearing right now, that would be 2 to 3 stops overexposed, rather than if I took the entire scene and metered from there.
Right. Basically, what I wanted to just say is that I use the 18% gray understanding to gear my exposures when I didn't really want my highlights to be clipped. So if I knew that if I was photographing something that was near white and I was aiming at that means I'm going to be underexposed in my shadows, and I'm not going to lose my highlights, but then again, I'm not going to be able to really work it on my negative either, because it's just be too daggone dark.
Right,
So
you would get your base
I'd have
plus
to have
fog
more in the dark room than anything.
Right, base plus fog in the dark room. In digital, you want to go a little bit lower on your exposure, so you have density. So you have image to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, folks, just to note that Marc's screen has gone still, but Marc is still with us, so thank you for that.
Okay. It's okay. But another factor, I'm not sure if you touched on it with the exposure value chart, is, and I've had to do that too, and especially working in direct sunlight, that the third component of that would be the ISO, of course.
Right.
If I'm used to shooting at 800, but if I'm shooting into direct sunlight, or if I'm trying to get a certain effect, sometimes I'll drop the ISO down to 64 or 32 or whatever, just so that I can get like a really bright scene or something, and still get a high enough shutter speed that I don't have to put it on a tripod, or vice versa, get the effect that I want with the tripod. So the triad, our nuclear deterrent, is an f-stop, shutter speed, and the ISO. So you can play with those to get the desired effect. And the beautiful thing about digital is, you don't really worry that much about, your grain size, which in film, you mess with your ISO, guess what? You're going to get, hail size grain out of that thing. So
right, but there is a value to that, and there are certain subjects because of that you could photograph that way. Night scenes, nightclubs.
Sure, absolutely.
So
or try infrared. I highly recommend it. That's some fun stuff. A Rat 25 filter on your flash. Oh man, you can have a lot of fun. Okay, that's another story. Go ahead.
Is it my turn to do the math? Is that it?
Yes, Marc, it's your turn to do the math.
Do the math. Okay. Now you see a lot of videos on YouTube talking about composition. They'll talk about the golden ratio and Fibonacci spiral and how to get the subject in the right area. But one of the things they don't really talk about is the fact that before Fibonacci, there was a Greek mathematical philosopher named Pythagoras. The Pythagorean theorem is
He had a
an
camera.
algebraic equation. He was an artist and he was a mathematician who was actually credited with the development of music. So it's really kind of odd that we apply this to photography. But he's the guy who came up with he was credited with the formula that C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Now, what does that mean? It's also, it also means that C, right, equals the square root of A squared plus B squared. What that means is if you have one dimension, right, your long dimension of your format, of your sensor, and you multiply that by itself, and then you take the short dimension of your sensor and you multiply that by itself, you add them together. If you take the square root of that, you'll get the diagonal length across from one corner to another corner. And one of the
So
things
if I take a Canon and multiply it by itself and a Nikon and multiply it by itself, will that, and I add them, will I have a Leica?
This is 8th grade, 9th grade mathematics, right? And it's really funny because we all spent, I know I did, well, when will we ever use this algebra that we are learning? The actuality is if you have an iPhone 6, probably earlier, maybe a few later, if you have an iPhone 6, if you actually do the math between the length of the sensor and the width of the sensor that I just, in that formula that you see on the screen now, you will see that the long dimension is 6 millimeters. Okay, it works out. It is the exact same format, right? If you go to the next slide.
You seriously doing equations?
Yes, because I said do the math, so I figured let me see what we can do. And it came to me because I was thinking about a medium format sensor. Most of them are 33 by 44, 33 by 44, 30. And when we were young, a medium format camera was based on 120 film, right? Which was always 6 millimeter wide, 6 centimeters wide. Right. And so the only thing that could be modified was either the length of the film plane or the frame. It was either 6, 7, or 9, right? That was really it. And so now with all these format changes, I found this very interesting that the sensor size, right, is 33 by 44, which was kind of odd to me. You know, I don't remember ever having a film camera that had quite those dimensions. And so I thought about it, kept thinking about it, and then it hit me one day that 33 squared times. It's
Greg,
just crazy.
Huh?
33,
what?
It's
I'm awake.
Now, what's really kind of weird is that what you see on the left, right? What you see on the left is the same format as what you see on the right, right? Can you tell me which one? Or you guys might know because you might recognize some of the edges. But can you tell me which one is medium format and which one's the iPhone?
The right is iPhone.
I'm going to, wow, no. I'm going to figure that the one on the left is the iPhone.
All right.
That would be my guess.
Now, there you go, right? They both still, I'll tell you in a second, they both have the exact same proportions in their format. And that's probably one of the reasons why when we see these beautiful photographs, right? Camera manufacturers are not dumb. When they see these beautiful photographs from all the medium format cameras, you look and you go, oh, you know, this looks fantastic. Well, yes, the optics are superior in, let's say, a Hasselblad, right? Yes, the resolution is fantastic, and the color rendering is better than anything you've ever seen. But there's something very subtle also going on. They've chosen an aspect ratio that is very similar to one of the most popular photographic aspect devices that we've ever had, and that is an iPhone. Now, in my case, I use an iPhone 6, and you can go to the next one.
Okay.
Can you go to the next one, or is it up?
Yeah,
There it is. It should be both of them. And what you'll see, actually, it looks like it's twisted.
It's vertical. It's not a horizontal.
It should be. You're horizontal now?
No, it was a vertical when you gave it to me.
Well, hang on one second. Let me see if I can give it to you.
Give me a sec. Let me see if I can't.
Uh,
I can't rotate the image.
You can't rotate it?
No.
The toughest math class I had was statistics. I passed it, but man, that was like a fight. And I was all bruised up after that class. So,
Wow. Really?
you like statistics?
Okay. Mark, I can actually probably do that. Go ahead, guys. I can probably do this real quick.
Wait a minute. Did you like statistics?
Anyway, what I was going to say was that these two very, very different cameras, right? For lack of a better way of putting it. One's a cell phone, right? One's a smartphone. The other one's a professional camera. They have the same aspect ratio. And because they have the same aspect ratio, you can find yourself really enjoying both images. And so I'm going to
Here's the horizontal.
Here's
the horizontal aspect ratio.
Let's see. Did you get the two of them together? No.
No, I didn't get the two of them together.
Let me give this to you right now. Hang on. I apologize for that. I thought I had sent you both of them.
No. Okay. I can really do a quick
Yeah, right.
No, Mark. I got it, Mark.
You got it?
Yeah, I can.
Everyone home.
Where did I put Mark?
Oh, show me the math.
Yeah.
Show me the math. Oh, show me the math.
Okay, it's funny. It keeps on opening. Okay, I'm sorry, people out there.
Show me
Technical difficulty.
Show me the math.
Hold on.
Show me the math.
Well, that's
Show
weird.
me the math.
Okay. Nope.
Oh, show me the math.
Well, anyway.
No. Okay.
Well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Show me
I really can't show them at the same time. I could show them at different times, but I have both of them. So here's the vertical one, and here's the horizontal.
Well,
unfortunately, I can't show them at the same time.
Danger, man, working above.
Both images at the same time.
No, I'm using the same. I can't share the same. I can't share two windows through Skype. I can only share one.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on.
I'd have to open them both up in.
Anyway. Trying to post it to you right now. In any event, the one on the left. Hang on one second. Let me go back to what we were doing. Can you go back to the frames?
Yeah. The frame is on screen now. The equations.
All right. So if you the two equations, what you're going to see is both of those images, right? The one on the right, is the medium format camera. That's the one on the left. Excuse me, the one on the left rather. The one on the left is the medium format camera. The one on the right is from the iPhone. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason, I am sending you this image and it is locking up. Now it should be two of them together. I don't know why, and I sent you both of them.
Okay.
In any event.
Give me a second. I will stop sharing the screen for a moment.
Wait, go back to that for a second. I want to look this up.
What's that?
The theorem A equals square root of C plus C minus A or plus?
It's C equals
square root of A squared plus B squared.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I should be able to send it to you through here, correct?
Okay, what has this got to do with photography? I got to talk to the elephant in the room.
Aspect ratio, dude.
Yeah.
And we care why?
Absolutely.
Why?
Okay, you want to know about aspect ratio if you're going to shoot panorama.
Well, not just panorama. You want to know about your aspect ratio if you're going to select a camera. If you're going to select a camera, you have to understand whether you're selecting 35 millimeter simulation, right? Or whether it's full frame, or whether you're selecting a square simulation, or all these different formats that exist because of what the old photography used to be like.
Okay, what about the new photography where nobody really cares? There's so much in Photoshop you can do to make it a square format.
I think people do care.
Which ones?
What do you mean?
Ooh. I mean, I don't think they're, when they're shooting their TikTok video or their, Instagram post that they're interested in whether it's a square format or a, 4x3. I'm just saying.
Ken, sorry about the delay, guys. We just reloaded it. If you take a look in
go back. You could drop that picture. Is that A squared? C equals A squared, the square root of A squared plus B squared. Okay, that is correct. I think Pythagoras has an Instagram page too. Hold on. Let me see if you got an Instagram.
Did you find it? See it? It's underneath those pictures. It's one of the replies. Got it?
I think he does have an Instagram page.
No.
Oh, look at that. That's cute. They got people doing yoga exhibiting the triangle. That is a cool shot.
Marc, it says the content is not available right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So.
That is so crazy. All right, hang on. Wonder why I did that. Oh, well. No, I had trouble uploading the same photograph previously.
Okay.
Well, if you didn't do the math, it's going to be difficult.
Well, you know what's really crazy? I did all this math. I really thought I had it right, and it just loaded, and I don't know. It seems like
here we are.
Well, let's take a look again. Take a look.
No, let's move along. What else do we got?
Well, we are
one more time.
We'll have to edit.
One more time. Good.
Well, anyway, it's there now.
This is
I'm looking at it now. Well, I'm looking at it now.
Okay, so what was the point about the triangle and Pythagoras?
Not available.
All right. Well, anyway,
you pissed off the photo gods.
All right. Here, anyway, the point that is made, all that algebra that you thought that you had in high school, which you didn't care about. All right. At the end of the day, the machines that we are using are based. Well, many people feel they didn't like algebra, and that's one of those common things that people say is, "Oh my goodness, when am I going to ever use this?"
Product placement is that Pepsi or Dr. Pepper?
Those are the principles that we create. Those are to create the tools that we are using, whether we're happy about it or not. And it's a really amazing thing to me to see that one manufacturer has created pretty much a brand new format for us that, that's so pervasive that we have a preference for that all the way up through the professional level devices.
So, Mark, my question is, and sort of piggyback off of what Greg mentioned. The only person who's going to be interested in that depth of knowledge and understanding is going to be
The engineer.
the engineer, or the maybe a few select top level photographers who need that information, but they're really going on the notion, 35 millimeter, 4x5, 6x7, and they'll work within those ratios, and they'll work bigger and they'll crop down. But I don't think they're going to really decide that they're going to need a 33 by 33.8 chip versus a 34.33.7 chip.
No, it's basically what I'm getting at is, do you need an aspect ratio that's very similar to that 33 by 44, or do you need an aspect ratio that is closer to the 24 by 36 in the that we call 35 millimeter?
Okay, that's a big range difference, though.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the difference between what we use now, which is, as Greg mentioned, everything. And I think, quite honestly, if you don't care about the original format of your of your camera or your frame, then you're not really working the frame. I mean, I think it's safe to say that when people select cameras, they make specific choices about the look that they want, right? In their imagery. Certainly the original imagery, before it's been retouched, before it's been cropped. They want to get a certain look and feel. And I think that to just sort of poo-poo the idea that this kind of information is only for a select few, it really does a disservice to the fact that it's something that we all live with. I mean, anyone who's got an iPhone, an old iPhone, like an old iPhone 6, that individual is using that particular, not just aspect ratio, but that exact same formula is what they're working with every day. Just like the people who are using most of the medium format cameras are using that same.
But we're talking about populist, stuff. It's like when before the brownie came out, people were there was this philosopher, I forget his name. It's like people are so happy to be able to speak that they don't really care what they say. I'm sure I'm misquoting him, but the same thing with the brownie. People were just so happy to be able to take pictures. They were not. Oops, I gotta plug in. They were not really concerned whether it was a square format. They were just happy to be able to get pictures. Not to negate all the math that went into it. It's very important. But a lot of the photography that's done now is editorial, and editorial would decide, well, we shoot at this studio house, or for this publication, we shoot 2.25. We shoot square format. We shoot, it has to be 6x7. Or it can be shoot tough, or 4x3 for 35 millimeter, because our editorial pages are like that or like that. So not to negate the math of it, but
that's what the intention to crop to fit the needs of the medium. We talked a little bit about the idea of having a certain level of artistic integrity when you're taking a photograph and using the full frame, right? And so if you don't know what the frame is, then how do you have that sense of artistic integrity in using the full frame?
The artistic integrity comes in the creativity in the image. You're getting lost in the tech side of it when you're forgetting, like if because people with very little photographic experience come up with these imagery just because what they choose to put in the frame is more important than the camera that they're using, the format they're using.
Yes, and that is very, very important. However, if you've selected a particular camera, if you've selected a view camera, right? That is 4x5, 5x7, or 8x10, right? Yes, there are a lot of concerns that go into that about the logistics of transporting that device around to take your pictures. But what's most important is the artistic integrity of your photograph is judged at a place like Pratt by how much of that full frame you have used, right? That is what we would call in our Bachelor of Fine Art program, right, that we took, the artistic integrity of the photographer. Now, yes, all the things you
Yeah,
mentioned
but
are
the instructors
world
were no.
concern.
I disagree. It has a lot to do with the instructor you get too, because there were some photographers who were, I'll never forget. One of them was disgruntled because Cindy Sherman beat him for a Guggenheim. So Cindy Sherman was badass. So so that whole aesthetic depends on the instructor. And if your work was better than the instructors, they got jealous. So I say just
Right,
keep on shooting.
but that's completely different. I want to stick to the idea that, and this is just the one topic for this one discussion, is that the mathematical information that you learned in high school is very, very valid. And people almost always say, "Oh, I'll never use algebra." I want people to understand that if you have a cell phone, there's a good chance that when you take a picture and you judge whether something's in a corner or whether something's in the center, you are utilizing
The rule
the
of thirds.
the rule of thirds in every format works, right? But in that iPhone, which is in this case the image on the left, or the medium format camera, which is the image on the right, they have the same proportions.
Which one
Right?
was the iPhone? The
And what's
one on the right?
really important, the one, the one on the left, the one on the
The one
left.
on the left was the iPhone?
That is correct.
Oh, well.
So
You
what's
nailed it,
really
Mr.
important?
Nelson.
What's really important? Oh no, I switched them around. Greg, you got the iPhone one. You that was
Hey!
the. What was really, but it's really important to understand that all photography, particularly now that it's digital,
Which
almost
literally
all about
means numbers.
mathematics. And what we do is we use, and we yes, exactly, and we use our understanding of proportions, right? We use our understanding of the light values that Kenneth kindly illustrated earlier. We understanding of composition that you always talk about, rule of thirds. You haven't gotten into the Fibonacci spiral and the golden ratio for composition. But at the end of the day, all of these mathematical equations are things that we have ingested and we
I
use
was
without thinking. It's become second nature.
I was
Ken
saying
mentioned
that the other day. I took some pictures
about
and I just wished that I'd used the Fibonacci spiral. I was kicking myself. Man, Fibonacci spiral. Totally
well,
forgot to use it.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I'm just trying to say that there's a lot of mathematics involved, and it's like just the
Of
one
course.
discussion, the one show, right? That's really, and I think you do yourself a disservice to not appreciate the engineering that goes into that. Engineering and art go hand in hand. They have throughout Western culture, throughout the world, from the beginning of
All cultures,
philosophy,
you have
right?
to use math.
Right,
All cultures,
right,
not just
right,
Western culture.
right. So I
Eastern,
think
Central, Middle,
have,
South.
but I think to have an understanding of what you're doing, you should at least know what you're working with. And that's all. I just wanted to point out who very popular at opposite ends of the spectrum photographically have a lot more in common because they share the mathematical principle of using the Pythagorean theorem to create the canvas,
Which
so
he
to speak,
learned
that
in
that sends.
Egypt, which is a
Right.
misnomer, but yeah,
Right. Well, I said he's credited with it, right? I mean, he's credited with that theorem. The other people say other people have done
he
it. But
studied
that's really
in
all.
Egypt, so Africa. So yeah, well said. I can't
So,
hear you.
guys, sorry to take so much time getting this image to you. Sorry, Kenneth. I thought I had gotten it to you earlier. Do you guys have anything else to add or to say or to critique or whatever?
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to say is that you cannot. I don't think it's good or even effective to place a mathematical equation on the full frame aesthetic, since it's not really a mathematical equation. It's more of an aesthetical evaluation or an aesthetical subjective thing. And I was, as you were talking about using the full frame, I'm thinking, well, when we were working in the studio, we hardly ever used the full frame on a 4x5 camera. We actually, in some cases, in order to use the full frame, we actually split the 4x5 in half so that we can expose the same sheet of paper twice in half so we could save on film.
There was not to create this, a certain level of artistic certain level of aesthetics to it. We were creating to have crop areas. So the copy could be placed anywhere within that frame if need be. So some of the aesthetic concerns of working with the going out of the border, working the corners, all out the window in the studio.
Hey, Greg, I really can't hear Mark. Mark,
sorry.
No, what I was saying that when we worked in the studio, we photographed with the notion that we were going to crop or place text in areas that were free within the frame, and that's different. I mean, you look at these two images. One's a studio photograph that has, that begs to have copy dropped into it or cropped, right? And on the left, you've got an iPhone image, right? And that iPhone image is pretty much working the entire frame. My choices aren't the best. You don't necessarily agree with it.
See, Mark, that's the difference, though, because to me, when you're working the entire frame, that's every centimeter of the frame. And here, in that particular instance, it's not working every centimeter because you have negative space and you have positive space there. So to me, when you're doing a mathematical equation such as that, you're asking, what you're implying to me is that every centimeter of the frame is used up with the understanding that everything within that frame is there at the behest and request of the person who photographed it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I get you. No. What I'm getting at isn't the composition should fit into these boxes. What I'm saying is that it's important to understand that the substrate you're given to work with has similar dimensions in these types of devices, and that it's not by accident. It's by design, and most importantly, these are proportions, right, that are new to photography because they are digital conventions. I mean, I think these might be, formats that I don't remember seeing formats quite like this in film as the native format, native dimensions of a piece of film.
Yeah, I would have never seen it either because for the most part...
Film the medium or film the physical cellulose with chemicals on it?
Film the medium. Like if you took a sheet of film or a roll of film.
Okay, got it. You don't have to go further.
There you go. These dimensions don't match, and this is specific to the new digital age.
That all well and good. That's great, but dance.
Well, I was saying,
talking about dance and speaking instead of dancing is a disservice to the dancing. Now we're talking about photography and talking about numbers. Photography is about imagery. Where's the imagery?
Right, and that's why with every discussion, I always have the images that I'm talking about. I don't talk about images.
But there's no big difference, especially when you get into content, which is what art is. It's content. Do you think Picasso cared whether or not he used a 4x3 canvas or a 3x4 canvas? It's what he painted on it, which is what matters.
I think most painters do choose a canvas specific to
good Lord.
a scale. They work with
so you're going to tell me Joe Schmo Joe Schmo painting a painting on the same format as Van Gogh, is of equal importance because the frame is the same size?
No, Greg,
No,
that's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying.
no.
Well, somebody
I think
explain it
that
to me because
Picasso
I'm lost
specifically,
in this. The
I've
numbers
spec-
are not as important as the content.
I don't
That's
know if
like the
that's,
difference between a Pinto and a Tesla. They're
I
both
think,
but
cars.
Greg, I think when you're talking about a
well, I
painter,
mean,
I think a painter specifically chooses the canvas size relative to their imagery. I tend to believe that more so than any photographer would.
Okay, but again, again, you look at Joe Schmo shooting street photography, and then you look at the FSA photographers, they both use the same format, or a Vogue photographer and just some rich kid who could afford a Hasselblad. They're not going to take the same content. It's what you capture is what makes the difference. So, the numbers, they're
I don't.
inconsequential. They're
I'm
important,
not
no doubt, but they are
right, but I am
inconsequential
not.
compared to the content.
But
We all use
what you're
words,
speaking
but
to
who writes like
is
Herman Melville? We all use words,
see
but
what I think. Right, and that's a good
who
example
writes
with
like Ta-Nehisi
writing.
Coates?
Right? For the
He
most
uses
part,
words.
right? For the most part, right? When you're talking about writing in American literature, depending on what time in history
See, again,
Mark,
here we go way off on a tangent. We're not
Mark,
even
you're
talking about
Mark,
photography.
Mark, we're
but at
losing.
the end of the day, what makes it, right. What I'm saying is that I'm not saying the content is equally important. What I'm saying
It's
is
more
it's
important.
important to understand that there aren't as many differences in terms of the dimensions that you're working with as one might think. I think it's very important for us to understand. When we used to take photographs and film, we
Where
understood
are the
what a
photographs?
millimeter film, what 35 millimeter film meant in terms of how much area was covered in the film plane, right? We made choices about lenses and exposure and film stocks and all of that. But at the end of the day, we understood what 35 millimeter film was and what the dimensions are. And you really pretty much hit on the nail on the head earlier when you selected vertical versus horizontal. Well, the square format 120 pretty much allowed enough crop room for you to kind of choose whichever way you wanted. But at the same time, there were people who really sort of fine tuned their understanding of the square. And most of us who do Instagram do that now. You fine tune your understanding of the square format, right? To create a
This
pleasing
this would have
composition.
been a far better discussion if you showed imagery using the different formats rather than a mathematical equation.
Well, I think what was really important to me was that I wanted people to understand that there is basically a, a format that is based on an ancient algebraic equation that we are not even aware of, that we are using every day when we take pictures with our iPhones, and even some professionals, when they use a medium format camera, aren't aware of the fact that the principles of design that we're using today have gone back thousands of years. These
Yeah,
ideas
Yeah, but
travel
not
through.
prisms.
Mark,
We're talking
yeah,
about a physical medium. We're not talking
yeah,
about
Mark,
mathematics that's
yeah,
been used
Mark,
since the beginning of time.
yeah, Mark, that's sort of equating a new driver
Excuse me.
having to know everything about their, 2021, every inch of their car in order to drive it. It just doesn't equal the same
No,
thing as having to know everything about photography and film to take a photograph. It's just too much of a stretch of the imagination for your average Joe
right,
to consider
right.
an equation like that.
Right. But basically, these conversations are for people who are truly interested in photography. So they have a slightly higher level of
Oh,
interest.
that's kind of snobby. So everybody else is stupid.
No,
I didn't say
interest
that
in
at all.
photography, Greg.
I said
Oh,
they're
this is for
aimed
people
at
who have a
people who are
higher interest in. Oh,
photography.
whoa! Hey, hang on there.
Who
Pump your
said anything
brakes
about
there, buddy.
stupid? What are you
Okay.
talking about?
Okay,
You
gentlemen, we're
said
running
people
over
who
Look,
have
I
a
time.
think
higher interest. Ugh.
We're running out of time, so
I-
I'm
I-
hoping that we can close this out.
Yeah, okay, let me close this out. All right. There was one more thing that was really kind of crazy that happened this week. There was a digital piece of art that was sold at Christie's auction house for $69 million because
Yeah.
it was converted, minted as a non-fungible digital item that
Yeah.
can be owned in its entirety. And I think that's a big deal for photographers. I truly believe that if someone like Adobe or some other company are able to sort of watermark that, I think a lot of the copyright issues will be remedied very quickly, and people will be able to get tokens and unlock those things as they need them, and it'll solve a lot of problems. I don't know what'll happen to social media because it's based a lot on sharing of imagery.
Mhm.
But we'll find out in the future.
Hold
Anyway,
on. Somebody gives me
talking about
$69 million. They can have the damn camera I shot it with. I'm going to
hear you. Well,
Fiji, baby.
this artist worked on this for years, every day.
Yeah.
It's called the 45,000 Days. It's fantastic.
$69 million.
To see it, it's
Yeah.
not my kind of work, but
It's
yeah, it's amazing. So anyway,
If somebody wants to pay me $69 million, they can have it. They can have anything they want with it. I'm going traveling. I'll
Hey,
see
Mark,
you
but
later.
that's not based on a photograph. That's just a digital construct, right?
it is based on 5,000 digital illustrations
Okay.
put together for an image, and
Okay.
it's I think they worked on it for something like 7 years or something like that.
Okay.
You can Google it. I'm
Okay,
sure it's around.
again, we're
Anyway,
like going way off topic.
Okay.
no, but I thought it was interesting because it was a digital thing. There was time.
I think so. Yeah. Digital mathematics. Okay. I'll take that.
Numbers.
Here's
Digital. One. Use your digits.
Start.
1 digit, 2 digit, 3 digits,
Anyway,
4 digits. Look, 10 digits.
so
It's
yeah,
digital.
we spoke a little bit. We didn't even get into resolution. So
Oh, good
anyway,
Lord.
Mark,
Say it.
close
Show
it out.
it. Don't say it.
all I want to do is the idea that you guys. What I chose. Hey, Greg keeps. Anyway, I chose to talk about the idea that algebra is applied still to this day to the mediums that we use. Kenneth talked about the exposure values that we use every day, and Greg talked about compositional ideas that we use every day. And all three of these are, I believe, equally valid. You guys may not agree, but I think when you are talking about photography, because of the nature of photography, it lends itself, because it's technical in some aspects, to some of the engineering ideas. So anyway, we have been 3 Black Pratt.
Appropriate
Brad.
ending. He just dropped
Greg
out.
Leghorn. Oh, do I have to say goodbye again?
No,
No,
we're